Hello there, and welcome to the Nerdy Up North Sister podcast. It's a podcast dedicated to the world of ice and fire. I am one of your hosts, Sam.
And I'm the other host, also Sam.
Yeah, I'm Sam number one. That's Sam number two.
The system not sorted that out yet.
Yeah, people actually really like that, by the way.
Oh, do they? Okay, we'll see
They did. They like the Sam one and Sam two. We could make this into a whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, this week, if you tuned into last week, you will know that it is all about the Targaryen bloodline. Going to get all crazy with some Targaryens. And I'm actually really excited because Sam's already gone through some notes for this, and I am so excited to get into this.
I'm excited. I spent so long on Sunday night researching all this up because it's like there's so much else to go up on it. I think it's a good starting point for our first episode, really.
I think it is, and I think it's going to like really intrigue people because it's not really what they're going to expect. I think they're going to expect we're going to talk about, Daenerys and her side thing, and it really isn't. No. So I'm hoping this kind of intrigues people to take a deeper dive into the Targaryens.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong, if you're a Daenerys fangirl and stuff like that, I get it. I'm sure everybody gets it. I personally am not at all. And obviously the forefront of the show was Targaryen. Any Targaryen based in Game of Thrones show anyway, was about obviously Daenerys, because there wasn't anybody else. Until obviously we've had House of the Dragon. We've been introduced to more stuff. I loved it, can't lie.
Yeah, me too.
But going back further, there's just so much. And so we'll cover a couple of things.
Yes.
For it.
I will get the disclaimer out the way with, and then I have a brief history of the Targaryen household that I want to read out that will just get you up to date with the actual Targaryen family. So everything discussed in today's episode is our opinions and our opinions alone. If you'd like to discuss anything from today's episode, please come and join us in the Facebook group where we can have an open discussion. What we won't have is anyone coming for us and telling us our opinions are wrong. We can all agree to disagree in fandom, so let's keep it fun, keep it kind, and keep the toxic behaviour out of nerdism.
Yes, we don't like toxicity.
We do
unless
not.
It's by System of a Down, then we love it.
Exactly. Then that's a completely different conversation. So this is taken from a wiki of House and Fire, and when I read it, I just thought it was absolutely a great start to just give you a brief outline of the Targaryen family if you are not familiar with them. So you'll have to bear with us for pronunciation. That's another thing I should add in the disclaimer, especially when it comes to Targaryens. Pronunciation will be something to be desired because their names are really hard. So, House Targaryen of Dragonstone is a noble family of Valyrian descent who once ruled the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. The Targaryen sigil is a 3-headed dragon breathing flames red on black. The house words are fire and blood. It eventually became the first royal house of the 7 kingdoms as House Targaryen of King's Landing. The only family of dragon lords who survived the Doom of Valyria. The Targaryens left the Valyrian freehold 12 years before the Doom. They resided for more than a century at Dragonstone Castle. It does this Dragonstone Castle on Dragonstone Island until Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenyra, hopefully I've said that right, Rhaenyra, began the first of the Wars of Conquest in 2 BC. So before Aegon's conquest, the family built the Aegon Fort in the new capital city of King's Landing. The Aegon Fort was later torn down and replaced by the Red Keep, which remained their main seat for the duration of their dynasty and for which housed the Iron Throne. The original castle was almost given to the heir of the throne, the Prince of Dragonstone. The Targaryens eventually built the summer Hall, which has been given to several younger sons of the families over the time. House Targaryen ruled as the House Targaryen ruled as the king of the Andals, the Rhaenyra, the First Men, and the Lords of the 7 Kingdoms, and the great house of the Crown Lands for nearly 300 years. 17 male Targaryens ruled from the Iron Throne. The dynasty ended with the death of Aerys the Mad King during Robert's Rebellion, in which the Targaryens were overthrown and replaced by House Baratheon. The two surviving of Aerys II, Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen, fled into exile and resided in the free cities of Essos ever since. And I thought that was just a great introduction into the Targaryens and where they came from and how they really started in King's Landing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of it covers up a decent part, because obviously we do know that they came across before the Doom of Valyria, and they were obviously, like you said, the main surviving, because they were quite a petty family. They weren't a very powerful family at all in Valyria. They were one of the weaker, smaller houses.
They were, and they came from really humbled background. You to think
for Valyria, anyway.
For Valyria, yes. But to think how they were to what they became it's very different.
Yeah, they weren't. They definitely weren't as important as they became in Westeros. That's for sure. And it kind of ties into the first, because I've got two main topics that I wanted to kind of go over relating to the Targaryen bloodline. And the first one it does tie into the sort of beginnings of the Targaryen family in Westeros, at least anyway, when they came across the Dragonstone and how that came about. And the first thing that I wanted to kind of go over is dragon dreams, because they're such a, I think they are a sort of focal point of the Targaryen family, and obviously of people, because the dragon dreams are a sort of affliction or a curse, however you want to put it, to basically family that have the dragon's blood.
Yeah.
So that can be any sometimes offshoots of the Targaryen families have had those dreams as well, but it's mostly Targaryens that do have them. And following, there's a Targaryen. This is going way beyond what Game of Thrones starts as. We're talking 400 years plus before what we see in the Game of Thrones show.
Yeah.
Was Daenerys the Dreamer. She is the one that had a dragon dream predicting and almost prophesizing the fall of Valyria.
Yes.
Not necessarily in the way that it happened, but that's how dragon dreams are. They're almost a sort of an ability that, as a prophecy, it doesn't necessarily mean it's exactly going to come true as it is, but the main focal point of said dream usually does come to fruition in some way. And that's what Daenerys had, and her father believed it. And that's why the family left Valyria and settled on Dragonstone. And again, this wasn't just straight away. It wasn't just a case of that Aegon the Conqueror, they just left at all. It was a long time before then anyway.
Yeah, they left, conquering hadn't even come into play at this
exactly,
point.
because Dragonstone is part of Westeros, but it is an offshoot of Big Island. We don't really see the size of Dragonstone. I think we will in season 2 of House. I
think we will. We've seen the scope of it. We've seen many times through House of the Dragon and also in Game of Thrones the main room that is used. And did you lose your mind when they actually used the map as it's meant to be used in House of the Dragon?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because I think that was a really nice point, because obviously we see Stannis use it, obviously, and Stannis doesn't really know what it's being used for.
No.
Stannis was given Dragonstone, or just told to take Dragonstone?
Was he? Oh God! I mean, we'll probably get into this when we do Baratheons and Stannis, but didn't he just go there because
I think he went and took it from somebody and ended up just staying there, and there was a lot of issues with that, because there's just things that happen that we'll get into at later points, and I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but something to do with a lot of problems with Stannis being on that island, and all that sort of thing anyway.
Because it's Stannis, because he was an arsehole.
but still, going back to using the table and seeing how that was done, it was fantastic, because effectively that's where the Dragon Lords first settled, and that's where you have originally the dragons. There was, at the time of House of the Dragon, there are still wild dragons, and nobody sort of knew about that realistically if you just watch the shows, until obviously Daemon mentions it.
Yes.
And I think we will definitely see more of where those dragons are, because we know for sure that I think it's Vermithor, who was Jaehaerys' dragon, the Bronze Fury. He's obviously in some sort of cave under Dragonstone, or randomly on Dragonstone. But then you've got the cannibal dragon, you've got sheep stealer, all those sort of dragons that are just randomly about, and whether we see them, because we have been promised, I think it's 19 different dragons.
19
House of the
different,
Dragon,
19
something along
different
those
dragons.
lines.
And we've barely scratched the surface on season
Yes.
1 with the amount of dragons that they have.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And even coming up to the sort of the Dance of the Dragons and stuff like that, again, these are things that have been mentioned in Dragon Dreams. Because we see this is the difference from the books. Obviously, I've been doing my research, as I should be really. Apologise if I do get some bits maybe slightly a little bit wrong, because again, I haven't read the books. I've had to do separate research. But we do see the likes of Dany. We said we weren't going to mention Dany too much, but this is the only point I'm going to mention about her regarding the Targaryen stuff, because she does have dragon. She did have dragon dreams herself. Yes. She dreamed of her dragons, but she also, which I think is a really sort of almost showing the prophetic nature of the dreams, that she did dream of joining Rhaegar on the Trident, and she was on Dragonback, and the almost usurpers in Robert's Rebellion, she saw them on the opposite side. However, they were usurpers of ice. And is that the case, that she's trying to help out Rhaegar? It's just because she's dreaming about trying to help out her big brother? I don't think so. I think it's more sort of prophetic vision of, because Jon Snow obviously is born of Rhaegar, is Rhaegar's son, but she probably didn't know that at the time at all. So I think that she's that's her prophesizing joining Jon at a very integral battle, such as the Trident was an integral battle for Robert's Rebellion.
Yeah.
Joining an integral battle to face the White Walkers. Obviously, she didn't know the White Walkers and who they were at the time, but obviously they are still.
There's always been something with her and ice. If you go to season 2 and she's in the House of the Undying, and she has, I don't know if it's a dragon dream or if it's just a vision, and she walks through the throne room with the ice. Now I know that is in the second book, because I've read it.
The destroyed throne in the throne room, isn't there?
Yeah, and she walks through it in snow. She has a lot of again, I'm not too sure if they're just visions or dragon dreams, but she has a lot of imagery where ice is involved. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. And this obviously ties into a lot of other theories regarding the Princess Promised, which I will touch on a little bit in a bit. With my other topic, but I think that can potentially be brought in, because that it potentially is a dragon dream. But again, I think this is where Game of Thrones falls a little bit short in explaining them, potentially, because a lot of people watch the show and have never read the books, like myself.
Yeah,
which I think is
you're just relying on what you are relying on what you're seeing is going to have an explanation, and unfortunately, Game of Thrones had a tendency of putting stuff out there and giving zero explanation for it.
Yeah, I think it's both a good and a bad thing, really, with that, because I think the downside of it, obviously, is if you're not kind of a person that gets like obsessed with certain things, like us two Sams, exactly.
No.
Yeah,
like us.
If you're just kind of like a casual watcher, you're not really too interested in the backstories. You don't really care. You just want to watch what's in front of you. They're the sort of people that I think don't necessarily think that Game of Thrones is as good, and potentially didn't even really watch all of it. They watched certain points, then just went, I got a bit bored of it, because I think it's a really half and half of it. Kind of expects you to know some bits from the books anyway.
Yeah.
But also from what you've just watched from previous episodes and what's been mentioned, and it's a show that you do, especially early doors. You really, really have to pay attention. Really have to pay attention. But then I think that the good part of doing stuff like that is that if things are only briefly touched upon, even if it's not mentioned in the books, for instance, because George R. R. Martin did have a lot of say over the TV shows. He was a producer. So he would have included these and been okay with these being included as canon. And well, in my opinion anyway, for that.
From what we've read and seen on interviews, that's the impression.
Yeah, but I think that leads to a lot of theories as well, and that's something that I do think that makes Game of Thrones so good, is that the theories while you're watching the show, after the show, news that you hear with new shows that are coming out, like with House of the Dragon, but also the context of what's happening, the content of the shows is that there's just so many theories about how things potentially could have been, linking back to the books, even just sole theories based on the books as well. As well, and that's where I think Dragon Dreams do tie into it. But the Dragon Dreams, the precede, not proceed, to clarify. The house, especially the House of Dragon show. Obviously, I know that's set in the past, but I'm talking chronologically, show-wise. In Game of Thrones, up until then, a lot of Dragon Dreams that we'd heard of were more sort of set in stone prophecies.
Yeah, that's right.
And we talk about Aegon the Conqueror's Dragon Dream, because he did dream about the return of the White Walkers. And also everyone's favourite, again, I'm going to mention it again, everyone's favourite Guess Who that didn't really go anywhere, that we didn't really find out much on, Azor Ahai, the Prince that was promised. We have ideas and theories, obviously, but it's not been completely confirmed.
No, and it's, again, we're going back in time with House of the Dragon. Viserys, is it Viserys?
Viserys.
You have to forgive me with names, but Paddy Constantine's character, Viserys, yes. He mentions Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, just before he dies, doesn't he?
Correct, yeah, because he's again another Dragon Dream. You've been reading my case cards that I've got. For everyone that's watching, I've got case cards full of things that I was researching. So if you do see me look off, it's because I can't remember what I've written down.
And if you see my face illuminate, it's because I've got my Google open.
But yeah, that's again, I wanted to touch upon going into House of the Dragon, because this is where some of the Dragon Dreams do get a bit more skew-iffed, and they are more recent, rather than, like, for instance, Aegon the Conqueror is predicting something that's happening 100 years in the future. He's prophesizing something. He prophesies that Azor Ahai would be born of his line, so that through his direct Targaryen line, and that's what was inscribed on the dagger.
Yes.
Now, obviously, the dagger has been passed down, and this is the dagger that we see with Viserys.
Yeah,
and he's very much into that prophecy as well. He believes Rhaenyra potentially is the prince that was promised, because I think with how it was originally written out in Valyria, it's not gender specific.
No, it's
whether
not.
It's prince or princess, it's just kind of the wording. But prince could mean male, female, and so with how Viserys is, he believes obviously that potentially it's going to be Rhaenyra. That's why he starts getting quite close to her regarding it and starts talking about the prophecy. And again, he does Dragon Dream, but one of the most prominent Dragon Dreamers. Yeah, sorry.
You went
I read
up
something
there.
in my notes. Now I couldn't read. I've got terrible handwriting, so if I do stop randomly, it's because I can't read. But yeah, we're going back a little tiny bit on Azor Ahai. Again, I will pick up on it later, but this is where things start to tie in, and why I love this show, because with a Targaryen from 300 years ago, and a prophecy that we don't really know much about in the Game of Thrones show at the start. We see when Melisandre, the Red Priestess, is talking about Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised. The first prince that was promised that we see in the show ever is Stannis.
Oh God, yeah. Well, what was she thinking?
Well, with him being a Baratheon, he's of Targaryen blood as well.
She could have picked anyone and come to the same conclusion, and it could have been someone completely different.
Yeah, I know. And this is why again, with the theories, there's so much different things that can be done, because I will touch upon a favorite sort of theory, or I don't know if it's my theory or a wide theory. I don't know. It's just something that's in my brain. But with these sort of things, it's where it starts linking up with bringing past into present. Whereas with House of the Dragon, and we see someone who has dragon dreams, but they're almost waking dragon dreams.
Yeah.
And she's more of a background character, and you don't really take notice as much as the other characters do in the show. They kind of brush her off, and that's Helena Targaryen.
Helena, yeah. I couldn't think of her name there.
Exactly, and she's brilliant. I think she's played so well, because she is very mysterious almost, and she is more of a background character, so you kind of have to watch the show a couple of times almost if you don't quite get it the first time around.
Yeah, it's so on the first watch, you're in it for the two houses. You're in it for the drama. Let's be honest. You're in it for the drama. We're here for crazy shenanigans. But on second watch, when you pay close attention to her, my God, does it change the whole dynamic of that show? It did for me anyway.
Well, that's the thing, because when you realise she's actually predicting, whereas prophecies before with Dragon Dreams have been very much, and this could be the sort of craziness of the Targaryen bloodline. You know, there's a lot of inbreeding in the Targaryens, so sometimes it leads to like a curse potentially of just being crazy, and then it sort of flattens itself out, and in a couple of generations you get another crazy.
And it doesn't help that these poor people have dragon dreams. Like that it really doesn't help any other condition that they may have due to their incestual bloodline.
100%. But I really like though that they changed it up a little bit so it's a bit more present dragon dreams. So like it's a very soon sort of thing. It's not hundreds of years in the future. It's more of a now thing, because a couple of examples, and especially big examples that lead to further indications of how the show is going to go. Alicent is talking to is it Aemon? I'm pretty sure it's Aemon he doesn't have a dragon, because Aegon's got a dragon already, and Aemon is very upset that he doesn't have a dragon.
We also last week got the name wrong of Aemon's dragon.
Did we?
We said it was Balerion. It's not.
No, it's Visenya.
It's Vhagar.
Vhagar.
And last week, I'm sure last week we said.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry. It's only when I've been looking at the dragons' names again to try and because I can't pronounce them.
But I don't think we said Balerion, because I definitely know 100%.
I can't remember. Really just something like a little thing came in my head, and I was like, "Did we say that was his dragon?" Because if we did, we were very wrong.
The further disclaimer is that Targaryens have the same names a lot of the time, and the names are very difficult to pronounce sometimes.
I'm not gonna lie. The one that really tickled me funny bone though in House of the Dragon was you have all these Rhaenyras, Visenyas, Viserys, Joffrey.
Joffrey. But the show takes the mick out of itself a little bit for that anyway, and kind of is a bit almost breaking the fourth wall, because it's like Joffrey, Targaryen name is that? You know, that sort of thing, and they play on that a lot, and I really did love that. But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure it's Aemon. I'm gonna have to Google this now, just because now you've mentioned it, I'm very, very conscious.
Yeah.
Aemond. See, I've got it wrong. It was Aemond.
Aemond. Now that is eye patch guy.
Yes, that is Viserys' second son with Alicent. Alicent was trying to comfort Aemond in saying, you will have a dragon soon, just take some time, blah blah. And Helena in the background, she sits there and says, well, in order for him to have a dragon, he'll have to close an eye. And obviously we realise that when he then claims Vhagar, he then loses his eye.
That's absolutely right. Now, I didn't pick up on what she was doing until she said, coming from the ground, it'll come from the ground.
Oh, that's the other one I've got written down again.
Yeah, and
beast beneath
the beast beneath us. Yes,
and that predicts obviously Melee's breaking through the dragon. Is it the dragon? I don't even know what building they're in, because the.
Can we just talk about how amazing she is to start with? I can't.
Is remember. That
Rhaenys? Yes. How amazing Rhaenys is, and how amazing she looks on Melee. Like that's match made in heaven. But she could have stopped everything there and then.
Yeah, but she knew, didn't she? She knew that it wasn't her fight.
I know, and there's
start.
I know, and I get all that, but really, you're on this dragon. You've killed quite a few hundred people in doing so, by the way.
Well, we've kind of realised in Game of Thrones and the sort of universe of that. Unfortunately, bystanders are bystanders.
Yes, they are total red. They are total red jackets in the from the Star Trek world. They are gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't annoy us because I totally understood it, and we don't have a story if she just absolutely lays waste to all of them right there.
Not even just waste. If she even thinks, oh yeah, there's lots of innocent bystanders, because she knew she had to make a stand because the Greens, not black.
The Greens.
Because she knows it's not her fight, but she needs to know that, hang on a minute, something's going to happen now. You've done something that you shouldn't have done. And that was whole because Rhaenys was played. I think again, House of the Dragon, the characters and the actors,
Phenomenal.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Love them or hate them, that casting was absolutely super. The
awesome.
only issue I have is the Sons casting. They kind of got the actors round the wrong way.
Oh, for Aemond and Aegon.
Aemond, yeah, the kind of, but it works as they're older. I get it, but it's because it's David Tennant's son.
He plays one of them. Yes, it's the look, isn't it, of the actors?
Yeah, David Tennant. He should have played the other one.
Is it Ty? His name is Ty Tennant.
Yeah,
something?
He should have played the other one.
Aemond.
Yeah, but it didn't work that way. So when they come into, they look, but the brothers, the
Targaryen brothers as well. I think
exactly
the actor that plays Aemond as well. I've seen him in a couple of other things as well, and he's in the Last Kingdom. I'm a big fan of the Last Kingdom, and another Viking thing for you to watch there, Sam, as well.
No.
But he's really good. And I think he plays it so well. I think the actors play it so well because Aegon is portrayed as being just a real spoiled brat who doesn't really want to do anything. He doesn't really care until he becomes king. Whereas Aemond is very much a case of, I'm very bitter for a lot of things. My older brother who's going to be king is just a total fuckwit for the most part. He doesn't really care. I'm trying to do my duty, all this sort of thing. But also, after he loses his eye and manages to get Vhagar, he's on some mad power trip. But then we see it at the very end, when obviously Vhagar chews up, I think it's Araxes, the dragon.
Oh, it is
Rhaenyra's.
It's Vermax.
Is it Vermax?
Vermax, because Jaehaerys Valerian.
See, this is where it gets tricky because Rhaenyra's children, well, the strong children. I've got no idea what their names are. I keep forgetting constantly, and the dragons at this point, because they're so small and it keeps chopping and changing between in the show. That's where it gets a bit confusing for me. But when Vhagar chomps the younger son in half on Dragonback, you see Aemond realise almost like, oh shit.
You've just started civil war.
Yeah, all he wanted to do was tease him, but then he realised that he has got the biggest surviving dragon who is battle hardened, took part in Aegon's conquest, has burnt thousands and thousands and thousands of cities to the ground.
Yeah.
Ended many lives. That is a battle hardened dragon who needs a lot of control.
Yeah, and him and his power trip that he's on, he is not fit to ride him at all. But that look of holy shit, what have I done? And then we go to the end scene where Rhaenyra and Daemon's telling her what's just. Am I saying it right?
Rhaenyra? I'm sure it's Rhaenyra.
I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing these wrong. I'm sure it's Rhaenyra. When he tells
we're
her,
just embarrassing themselves at this point.
We really are. It's Targaryens, man. Their names are so hard.
It's Rhaenyra.
Yeah, but when he's telling her what's just happened, and she goes to the fire and she turns, and you see pain turn into anger.
Yeah, again.
Holy shit!
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I really can't wait for season 2 because that's going to go somewhere else. Because again, going back to the Dragon Dreams, it was all predicted, but we saw it in a different way. How it was actually started. These things are just a consequence of things that have already been put in place. And again, this is probably one of my after he'll have to close an eye. I think this is my favourite Dragon Dream in general from Helena, but in all Dragon Dreams, is that she starts talking how hand turns loom, and you don't get that at the start. However, the hand of the king is Otto Hightower. He is the one that starts the Dance of the Dragons. He's the loom. He's the one that starts weaving the webs and everything like that. And because House of Dragon is heavily focused on politics.
Yeah.
It's heavily focused. I don't mind that at all because it's really good and really interesting with other stories interwoven. More so than Game of Thrones because it is heavily focused. If for those who haven't seen House of the Dragon yet, again, still really enjoyable.
And also, shouldn't watch this episode. If you've not watched House of the Dragon,
to be fair, it's been out for long enough now that
exactly
realistically, we can't really help it. Again, though,
if we haven't spoiled it, the internet certainly would have done somewhere along the line.
But still enjoyable because, as we mentioned in the sort of intro episode that we did last week, even things that we discuss, it won't even begin to scratch the surface. Spoilers that you see won't even scratch the surface of if you've not watched Game of Thrones. You're just interested in the lore behind it and everything like that. It's just one of those. Unfortunately,
sorry.
Again, you still love it watching it because then you'll be able to attribute what you've just learned as well.
Well, that's very true.
Minus the names because we are getting the names. We're butchering them a little bit.
Yeah, we are butchering them left, right, and centre.
We've both had lions. It's our days off.
Yeah, I know. It's a chill day. I'm really bad with pronunciation to start with. So chucking in all these Targaryen names ain't going to help me
to be fair,
at all.
I think that's the one negative I have from the show. Because there are so many different people that are relevant.
Mm-hmm.
You've got all the Valyrians, you've got all the Targaryens, you've got the Hightowers, you've got the Strongs, you've got the Lannisters. So many other people in the show anyway. I think because with the time jumps as well, because when you're learning a character and you're learning their name, you're learning their face and who they are, you stick with that. As soon as you see a different actor playing that character, you've automatically got to go, right, which one's this?
Yeah.
And that's when you start getting the names mixed up because, you've immediately in the show, you've got, with the Targaryens, they tend to have, again, a lot of the same sort of names. Luckily, the ones that we've got so far are more, apart from Aegon, tend to be the first of their name. As far as kings go anyway.
Yeah.
With Viserys, so it's not really as hard, but because Paddy Constantine, I think, is the only actor that stays there as a Targaryen anyway. Apart from Otto Hightower, I think they're the two main characters that stay.
Damon as well.
Oh, sorry, Damon and Kristen, but
yeah, Kristen that was ridiculous. That
sent me weird. We won't go too much on that because I think that will be a bit of a spoiler as far as character arcs go.
Just actor. Could they not have aged him just a tiny bit?
Yeah, but a bit grey in his hair.
Yeah, he looks so fresh-faced all the time.
He was young, but he was already kind of a man at that point. So realistically, he's gone from the age of 18 to 28.
Still though, he's got to be a bit of battle-torn and worn out.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's where it causes a bit of issue with so many different names. But then you throw in all the dragons' names as well, and again, if you're not paying attention, it gets very confusing. And trying to go back to it, I've not done a second run through of House of the Dragon yet. I will be doing so very, very soon, though. Once I've finished off a couple of other shows, actually. But
that's me all over.
The first time round that you watch it, unless you've got everything written down, you're not really going to remember it. Don't hate yourself for not remembering either, because you can still, like me and Sam, we're sat here right now and going, you know what? We don't really know we don't know the spellings. We keep on getting people mixed up, but we don't care because we still love it. We know who we're talking about.
Exactly. And if you are fans, you're going to know who we're talking about. And if you know me from my other podcast, you will forgive me. Because I'm terrible.
I tend to be a bit harder on myself, but at the same time, though, you could give them whatever names you wanted to. It wouldn't really matter because it's how you focus on things.
Exactly. What was I going to say? It was something about Dragon Dreams and I've totally forgotten. Sorry, mine's gone blank.
Dragon Dream to go over as well before I start going on to the next topic. We're going to morph topics. This is how I've kind of done it, because arguably a character that nobody hates. I've never seen one person that's hated it. Sort of, we'll say a character that's between minor and major, who's Maester Aemon. Now, it's more so in the books as opposed to the show. He does mention it a little bit in the show, I think, about Dragon Dreams. About his brothers, I think.
Do you want to explain, just in case people are not sure who?
Yes, in case people are not
sure. Maester Aemon comes from.
Yes, Maester Aemon, who is at Castle Black, the old man that you see who is blind within the show. He is, in fact, it's revealed in the show to Jon Snow and to the rest of the viewers that he is a Targaryen. This is just show-wise. And he is, in fact, a Targaryen. So the Mad King, Aerys II, that was Maester Aemon's, I want to say nephew. I'm pretty sure nephew.
I'm sure he says, when they took my nephew's children away.
Yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so Maester Aemon is very old. Now, how Maester Aemon was in line for the throne.
Yes.
However, because his two elder brothers died, he refused the throne because at this point he was already a qualified Maester.
Mhm.
He didn't want the throne, and not many people liked Maester Aemon because of how he was, but they still thought he should have the throne because he was the third eldest son.
Yeah.
Of Maekor, who was his father.
Mhm.
That's why his little brother took the throne, and his name was Aegon the Unlikely, because it was very, very unlikely that the fourth child was going to
Yeah.
be a king. And then his child was the Mad King Aerys II, same as his sister wife Rhaela Targaryen.
Rhaela.
Rhaella. I don't know if it's pronounced just Rhael or Rhaella. And that's where you have then Rhaegar, Viserys, and Daenerys. That's where they come from. So effectively, Daenerys is Maester Aemon's great niece.
Yes.
And obviously he doesn't, well, we don't know if he knows or not, because I'm going to come on to this in a little tiny bit. But obviously we don't know at the time or not if he realises that Jon Snow, it won't make sense yet, is his great nephew.
I think he did know.
Well, this is the thing that I'm going to come on to next, because this is how it ties into my next topic. My next topic that I wanted to discuss about the Targaryen bloodline is arguably one of the most wasted characters in the entire of the show.
And I'm just going to put it out before you reveal it that I did not know this. Sam told me just before we come on, and my mind was fucking blown by. You're going to love this. Go for it.
So, well, I'm pretty sure, because most sort of trails lead to this anyway. I could be talking utter tosh right now. So before I even start talking about it, I'm just going to do a final check of when we go on to Google. Because the next character I wanted to talk about is Brendan Rivers. Now, you won't necessarily know him by that name, because by the time that we see him in the show, and it's pretty much confirmed with the way that he talks anyway, is that he is the three-eyed crow or raven, however you want to put it. Now, again, not many people can know who Brendan Rivers is. Because of his last name Rivers, he's clearly a bastard.
He's a bastard.
Now, he is a bastard of a king from quite a long time ago, who was Aegon IV. Now, Aegon IV, basically, to give you some backstory on Brendan Rivers, his story is absolutely mad. But he is he's a bastard son of Aegon IV. Aegon IV, with what George R.R. Martin has said and basically confirmed anyway, is that he modelled Aegon IV when he was writing the histories and stuff like that on Henry VIII. Because, yeah, exactly. Because of how he was, because he was called Aegon the Unworthy, because he was very indulgent and just did some weird, stupid stuff. Because he had true-born sons anyway, but he also had some bastards. One of those bastards is Brendan Rivers. Because he had a big stain on his face, he had a big birthmark on his face, and then slightly in the shape of a raven, he was called the Blood Raven. Now, his story is, like I said, is really, really mad, because he starts off, he's kept in King's Landing and everything like that, but on his father's deathbed, he legitimized all of his bastards, which basically, for those who don't know, what that means is that he legitimizes them as actual heirs to the throne. Usually bastards aren't. If you think of Gendry, who was Robert Baratheon's bastard, it wasn't until he was legitimized that he could become Lord of Storm's End, that's it. Stormfront's something else entirely, isn't it? I don't know what and he was very much one for duty. He didn't care for the throne or anything like that. And it's just very, very strange how things sort of end up, because at the time of Game of Thrones, he's 125 years old. That's how far back we're kind of looking with him. And he is, in fact, Maester Aemon's great uncle. And they actually went to the wall together. The story starts way before that anyway with Bloodraven, but with Maester Aemon, that's kind of where they are, because they're both Targaryens and they both are pretty much directly related. And Yeah, after he was legitimised on his deathbed, it led to what has been mentioned at certain points, and you might have seen with people randomly talking about. I can't remember if it's made mentioned in Game of Thrones just randomly in passing, which is the Blackfyres Rebellion.
It's
One,
mentioned.
yeah, one of Brendan Rivers' brothers is Daemon Blackfyre. He wasn't originally called Daemon Blackfyre, but when he was legitimised, when he was legitimised, he was knighted quite early on by his father, and he was given the Targaryen Valyrian sword, Blackfyre, which was passed down from king to king to king to king. It was Aegon the Conqueror's
Yes,
sword.
that's how I knew that sword. It's
Yes.
Aegon's.
And he took, and when he was legitimised, he was like, well, no, hang on, I kind of want the throne. Because the actual king at the time was, I can't remember his name, I've not written it down. But they want the sort of people half wanted Daemon Blackfyre because he was a real resemblance to Aegon the Conqueror.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there was a lot of problem with the Dornish people at that time in King's Landing
Well,
because they had quite a lot of influence.
that was older in the conquest. He managed to, basically get everybody, including the Starks, to bend the knee.
Yes.
But the Dornish were an absolute piss and nightmare for him.
Oh God.
Yeah.
We will see that in the Dance of the Dragons. I will assure people of that.
His sister and favorite wife was murdered by them. Murdered or killed, it depends on how you look at it. He didn't take it too well. I think it was murdered too. But yeah, his favorite wife, because he absolutely, honestly, I was going to mention this at the end, but I'll mention it now. This book here, Fire and Blood, I'm only up to Aegon's just died, and we're moving on to the sons, because honestly, the bloody Targaryens, and they cannot follow rule, can they? They kind of just go into you get one of them who's like, I want to take over. If he conquests, I'm going to conquest too.
But this is the problem with the Targaryen bloodlines, is because they're so inbred, is
Mm-hmm.
that legitimate heirs to the throne, there are so many of them. And this is what happened with the Blackfyre Rebellion, because there was, I think, three brothers all vying for the throne. And again,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people wanted Daemon Blackfyre to be king because he resembled Aegon Targaryen the Conqueror. He was much more Targaryen-like, and he really divided the kingdom. And however, though, Bloodraven, Brendan Rivers, sided with his trueborn Targaryen, and I can't remember what his name was at all. I wonder if I can.
Also, the bookmark
Darren,
proves that I have read it.
Darren. Yes, Darren II. That was his legitimate brother, and he was the king. He was Darren II, and Bloodraven sided with him, while his other brothers, Bittersteel, who was, I've got it written down somewhere. God knows what his name was, but he was known as Bittersteel. I think he was Aegor Rivers, and yeah, Aegor. And Daemon Blackfyre were joined. Basically, with four brothers. Two of them were fighting Targaryens, two of them were Blackfyres and fighting Blackfyre-wise. Because that's how the whole Blackfyre family came about, was Daemon Blackfyre taking on the name of his Valyrian steel sword and saying, no, I'm going to make a family out of this. And their crest is basically the reverse colours of the Targaryen crest. So it's not a black background with a red dragon, it's a red background with a black dragon. And there was a big rebellion, lots of people killed, obviously, as usually are in rebellions. However, the turning point was actually Brendan Rivers. He had an elite sort of army that were called the Raven's Teeth. Really, really skilled.
And badass, man.
It is, but when you think about it, ravens don't even have teeth.
They do not, but still, if they did.
If they did, it would be cool as anything. But that's where the tide was turned, because Brendan Rivers turns up and just is like, with his archers and his Raven's Teeth, basically wipe out Daemon Blackfyre.
Bye, Daemon.
Kill Daemon, kill a couple of his sons as well, and Aegor Rivers, or Bittersteel, takes Blackfyre the sword, takes Daemon's wife and remaining kids, and buggers off into Essos or Volantis or wherever it is, and just runs away. But Brendan Rivers basically ends the Blackfyre Rebellion. and kind of everything's half okay. There's a few more rebellions, but they kind of ended before they even get started.
You'll find that a lot throughout the lore of Westeros. They'll it's like what do you call them in the sea? They kind of like to start rebellions and then get shut down straight away. What are they called, man? Theon's group of people.
Oh,
I can't think of their names.
the Greyjoys, but they're all
Greyjoys, that's
there's
it.
different names, because I mean that's an interesting topic we might be able to put up at some point as well. Because
the Greyjoys like to start rebellions and get crushed straight away.
Yes, but that's all the Iron Islanders, because there's actually a set number of families in the Iron Islands, and the Greyjoys are just the most recently voted kings of the Iron Islands. That's all it is. There's other families as well, which is again another mad thing, because to his credit, George R.R. Martin has done the work that he's done, pointing into the history and how the history kind of links up. There are a few obviously weak links where things don't quite make sense, but it's just ridiculous. Like with this Blackfire Rebellion, because it's only on pages. And following on from the Blackfire Rebellion, there was the Great Spring Sickness. And I think, again, that might have been mentioned very, very briefly somewhere. It might have been when Sam visited Old Town, where all the maesters
that would make sense.
I don't quite remember, but basically a load of people die, and it leads to Aerys the First becoming king. Now, Aerys, I think it's Brendan Rivers' nephew. I can't quite remember. There's so much. There's so many people. At this time, you've got to imagine as well the Targaryens and going up to House of the Dragon. They're basically in their prime. There are so many of them. If you just watch Game of Thrones, you're used to there being just a few.
Yeah.
But you look a couple of hundred years before, and they're bloody everywhere. They're head of there's a Targaryen in like every single household, basically. And there's just so many. But it ended up that Aerys the First was on the throne, and he actually named Brendan Rivers to be Hand of the King and Master of Whispers. Now, when he becomes Master of Whispers, this goes in such a weird direction as well, because of how he is. It's predicted that his mother was, I think she was very much into magic, but also his half sister lover, I'm going to say, because that's what she was, Shira. Shira Summit begins with an S. But there's a lot of magic involved at this point. It's where kind of Brendan becomes a lot more mystical and into the dark arts almost, because there's lots of stories of him being able to transform into animals, and he spies on people because he's now the Master of Whispers. And this is where things in my head start making sense as to why he became the Three-Eyed Raven. Because with a Three-Eyed Raven, basically, you are a green seer. Brendan Rivers is called the last green seer that awoke certain powers, but he already had a lot of magic. Anyway, he had lots of magic, and he also had a strange way of dealing with things, because he's an incredible warrior. He's not as big as his brothers.
No.
But he was cunning. Not only that, he had one of the other Targaryen Valyrian steel swords. He had Dark Sister. Now, Dark Sister is obviously mentioned in House of the Dragon because it's the sword that Daemon wields.
Yes, which I always thought was such a badass name.
Dark Sister is an incredible name for a sword. But this is the thing. He's got the sword, and he carries on as Hand of the King for until the time of Maekor. You know, he stays as Hand of the King and Master of Whispers. So you've got to imagine that's a decent amount of time. So he must have learned so much about the world being Master of Whispers, because if you think of Baelish and Varys, they know so much about the world. They know so many different bits and bobs. And
they're so cunning and devious as well.
So how much did Brendan Rivers learn extra compared to what he already knew and already found out? He was very much, and this is a recurring theme for Master of Whispers pretty much, is that he's there to serve the realm. He's not there to serve specific people. He's there to serve the realm. He does bad things for the better of the realm. It's frowned upon.
If you look at, I was going to say, if you look at Varys as a character just in Game of Thrones, you get an idea of what his job entails, because he is very much for the realm, and he says it constantly. Yeah,
exactly. And it is that sort of way, and Brendan is very much a character that does that, because kinslaying is very, very frowned upon. we hear a lot about kinslayers and how certain bits and bobs, but it is incredibly frowned upon within the world of Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
And
I don't understand that, but okay, it is.
Well, we're kinslayer. It's killing family, isn't it? You should. It's a carnal sin in this sort of universe. And he ended his half brother. He was a kinslayer. And he was not liked for it because he's a kinslayer. It's almost like you can't be trusted. How are you going to kill your own family?
That is true. Yeah, I get that, and that is prevalent throughout Game of Thrones as well.
Exactly, and he stays as, like I said, Master of Whispers and Hand of the King until the reign of Maekor. And obviously, this brings us to the sort of point of where we get more introduced historically wise to Maester Aemon.
Yeah.
Because Maekor's first couple of sons die, and there's a great council that's called. Now, at this point, the Blackfires are still sort of around, and one Blackfire is invited to the Great Council to decide the succession, because obviously there's Maester Aemon, there's lots of other. We see a Great Council with Jaehaerys I. That's how Viserys became king. It's almost like that. This is a second Great Council, because obviously this takes. Brendan Rivers is obviously after House of the Dragon, but with the problem with succession, because obviously Aegon, who was later known as Aegon the Fifth, I think. Egg, he's more commonly known as Egg because he's Aegon the Unlikely, but Aegon, not people are like, well, he's the fourth in line, surely there's a stronger claim to the throne and all this sort of thing. But Brendan does a naughty thing, and as soon he hates the Blackfires, hates them, and the Blackfire comes, and basically as soon as he gets there after being invited, Brendan kills him.
He's so badass,
literally straight away. And at the end of the Great Council, it's decided that Aegon the Unlikely would be King of Westeros. Obviously, because Maester Aemon doesn't want the throne and everything like that. Now, Aegon's first act is to arrest Brendan, throw him in prison, because he killed the Blackfire after he was invited to the Great Council. And Brendan kicks off saying that I've sacrificed so much for the realm and all this sort of thing. I killed a brother. This sort of thing. I've served the realm. And Aegon's like, well, tough. Your choices are stay in prison or you can go to the wall. Now, at this time is when obviously Maester Aemon joins the Night's Watch as well. And Brendan actually works his way up to becoming Lord Commander. Now, it's not sort of certain what number he is as far as Lord Commander goes, because there's not really a straight list. I think Jorah Mormont is like 997th or something like that, and he's probably and I don't. He's somewhere around 9. Brendan Rivers was somewhere around 992, 990, something like that.
They didn't have like to go through their Lord Commanders, didn't they?
Well, they did, and obviously, but it was almost like a vote. But you've got to imagine that sort of line of work. You're going to die quite.
That is, that's true.
Jorah Mormont wasn't Lord Commander for very long.
No, he wasn't
at all. He was only like 10, 11 years or something like that. He was already an old man. He was actually very old at the time of Game of Thrones.
That's very true.
But this is where things then obviously take the massive leap to how we see them in Game of Thrones with Brendan Rivers and how we're introduced with him, because randomly he disappears beyond the wall. Just completely disappears.
Just fucks off.
No,
Bad enough.
I think I was watching a YouTube video, and it's almost like it did make me laugh. I was doing this like 11 o'clock at night. And it made me laugh because it was like, oh yeah, Brendan just pops out for a ciggy and never comes back.
Going out for a loaf of bread.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then we don't see anything until because he was at the wall for 13 years, and then disappears, and then I think it's something like 30 or 50 years that he's like the Three-Eyed Raven, or becomes it and starts learning, because the Children of the Forest find whatever happens. We don't quite know with that anyway. But it's basically the Children of the Forest. He finds them, they find him, whatever. But he is the last Greenseer, which means that he's got certain abilities, which is what we know of what the Three-Eyed Raven can have. There were a lot of Greenseers that used to be, but we go back all the way to the Andals and the First Men.
Doesn't Bran's friend have some form of that?
Yes, he has he is a different type where he can sort of see into the future, which is a bit like it. It's slightly different. I can't remember what it's called, but
But
it is
it's
almost it's very similar.
got you. Yeah, got
Yeah,
you.
that's
Just to make sure I'm on the
John
right
Joe
page
Reed.
there.
Yeah, John Joe Reed is
That's it.
the one that it is. Is it John Joe? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's John Joe Mirror, isn't it?
Definitely Mira Reed. I always remember Mira Reed.
Yeah. And basically, this is when we then find Brendan Rivers, who is now the Three-Eyed Raven. Now, this brings on to some really interesting stuff about it, because we don't really quite know. We just it's if you only watch the show, because most of the sort of stuff comes from the books and how it's figured out that Brendan is, because what he says things like, my mother named me Brendan when I was at her breast and that sort of thing, and other things that he points to and everything like that is basically, this is Brendan Rivers. This is the Blood Raven. Now, Dark Sister, don't know where that is. The sword, God knows where. Will we ever find it again? Potentially. Who knows?
Who knows?
He's now morphed himself with a weird tree, and he is now the Three-Eyed Raven. And he's obviously been, as we see him in the show, he's been coming to Bran and everything like that anyway. Now, we know obviously what happens, so I won't go really into detail based on that. I'm going to kind of look a little bit further back at the potential influence that he's had as the Three-Eyed Raven. Because of all the power that he used to have, being Hand of the King, Master of Whispers, magic that he had at his disposal, how much influence could he have had on all proceedings? He could have been the master puppeteer behind the entire Game of Thrones show as we see it. He can be linked and attributed to everything. If you have the power of the Three-Eyed Raven to go to see into the past and potentially influence it, like we see Bran do, how much could he have done? And Brendan Rivers has always been about the realm. People had to die, everything like that. And it was the case that someone again had so he believed, or someone had a dragon dream, that the sort of for Aerys the Second, so Daenerys' dad, and Rhaella Targaryen, Azor Ahai would be born from that line. Now, obviously, going down that line, originally Maester Aemon thought it was Rhaegar Targaryen.
Right.
However, and Rhaegar Targaryen grew up believing it was him as well, but it wasn't, obviously, because of the circumstances behind his birth and everything like that. Anyway, the prophecy behind Azor Ahai, if you don't know, Azor Ahai basically is a big prophecy about a prince returning to end the White Walkers. They're born of smoke, and they're born of smoke and ice and.
Oh, that's right, because I always remember that line with Stannis. He was born among smoke and what is he?
There's different ways to say it, but it is a big prophecy for those that don't know. And we're kind of led to believe that at this point now Stannis is dead and is clearly not. This person is supposed to have been reborn as well, and obviously we see Jon Snow reborn. I personally think it probably is Jon Snow more than it is Daenerys.
Yeah, and I think that's what upset a lot of people at the end with Arya's killing the Night King.
Funnily enough, though, she killed the Night King with the dagger that is inscribed with the prophecy of Azor Ahai, Aegon's dagger, the dagger that we see in Viserys.
I was going to mention it earlier. The dagger that you see in House of the Dragon is the dagger that cut Bran.
Yes, nearly killed Bran. Yep.
Nearly killed Bran. Cut Catelyn Stark, which would have been fantastic if we went down Catelyn's actual arc, because that would have been very interesting. It ends up in the hand of Peter Baelish. It's in the hands of Tyrion Lannister. It's in the hand. Then it gets to Arya. But I never even. Up until that moment right there, it just hit us like, oh my God, that is the dagger that has the description on it.
And this is the sort of, again, the
still shouldn't have been her though.
No, I don't know about her, but I just think it's more because it was the training behind being a faceless person that she could sneak past the Night King.
Oh, we'll get into that. We'll get into that later on.
Again, though, what sort of influence did? I think personally, as a theory, that Blood Raven. Because this is another theory that I've got, with the only logical explanation for a character that we literally only see once and never get given a name either. I think, well, as far as I know, show-wise, because I haven't researched it book-wise, I think Blood Raven is very much a character that has been looking over things to make sure that certain things happen.
Yeah.
However, he was looking over Jon Snow, basically. He managed to push sort of certain things in certain directions. You know, a lot of Bran's sort of journey is related to Jon Snow. Finding out Jon Snow's heritage, finding out information, that sort of thing. And I think Bloodraven pushed him that way.
Yeah, it would have been good in the show if they showed that Jon is actually a warg as well, which is...
I think he is. In the books, it's...
In the books, oh, yeah, definitely in the books.
Theorized. Spoiler in the book, he's dead, isn't he? So
he's dead. Yeah, and he hasn't come back yet.
11
and if
years.
he doesn't finish the book, he ain't ever coming back.
Exactly.
But yeah, they don't explain that side of Jon in the show. That he actually has a lot more Stark in him, because for the Targaryens have their dragon dreams, a lot of Starks are wargs, which can
because of their connection to the First Men and all that.
Yeah, and they can warg into animals potentially. I mean, you see it with Bran. He goes into can't think of his direwolf's name off the top of my head.
Is it Summer?
Summer?
Yeah, Summer.
Yeah, Summer. And Rickon does it with Shaggy Dog as well, which I think is a great name for a direwolf. But yeah, they don't explain, and it would have been interesting if they did, because could he have influenced Jon in that sense? Could that be where the influence comes from?
Yeah, this is the thing, you don't quite know, but this also leads me on to a second part, that maybe he wasn't so sure when they were children, because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Brynden had a half-sister lover in Sheera.
Half-sister lover.
Yep, half-sister lover Sheera, and she was like a real magical sort of person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does anybody remember from the show a character called Quaithe?
We met Red Priestess?
Daenerys met her, and she's the one with all of those like metal over
chainmail on her. Yeah,
chainmail over her face.
She's a Red Priestess.
Well, this is the thing, though. It could be Sheera, and Sheera is looking after the other potential prince that was promised in Daenerys.
Okay, I'm really impressed that I knew who you were talking about. I'm now thinking, holy shit, that's amazing.
Because when you see it, when you see it in the show and around her eyes, she has more aged eyes anyway. Now, magic is used to keep Bloodraven alive, because as I mentioned, by the time of the show, he's about 125 years old. And it's the weirwood and everything like that that's keeping him alive for longer.
Mm-hmm.
What other magic is being involved, we don't know, because we know that the children of the forest are incredibly magical as well. Now, it could be that because of that, sort of, you know, Sheera went off to look after one potential prince that was promised, while Bloodraven looked after another. And that's one thing. But you know what is, and this is the thing as well, though, that blows my mind, is that with all of this, obviously he kind of knew that, well, Daenerys is going to be needed anyway with the dragons. Anyway.
Yeah.
She's going to be needed. Jon Snow is also going to be needed. We need to keep them alive. That's my sort of theory. We need to keep them alive. We need to push them in the right sort of direction. Although we don't really see Quaithe again anyway, it still could be the potential that that's who she actually is. That's the only logical explanation that I've found to why she would randomly appear and all this other random stuff.
And tell Jorah so much as well.
Exactly. And I think it's just a cool little way, because again, Sheera was magical. She could have easily, like with how the Red Priestesses extend their life with necklaces, how we see Melisandre do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy that Sheera could have done it a different way anyway, and be keeping an eye on in the background. It would have been quite a lot, and I think why she wasn't necessarily included more in the show was potentially, if that is the thing for it would be the case that there'd need to be a lot of explaining about the history of Bloodraven, and there would be too much to kind of go into with where we were already at with the Game of Thrones story anyway. Also, I have a sort of slight other theory that Bloodraven is actually the prince that was promised. Because if he realistically has everything set in stone, he's been influencing things to be moved a certain way and everything like that. Because there are stories about Aerys II going mad and saying, burn them all, burn them all, burn them all. There's actually theories that, similar to how Bran got into Hodor's head, that Bran or Bloodraven have gone back in time, got into Aerys' head to make sure that things can be prepared for the start of the White Walkers returning. The whole thing that, because obviously with Aerys going mad, burning the city, that's how Jaime kills him. That's what leads to, starts leading to like Robert's Rebellion and all sorts of other things as well at the time that happened. And these sort of theories are obviously why I love Game of Thrones anyway. But Bloodraven fits a lot of the prophecy that Azor Ahai. Now, when it's mentioned that it's more likely that the bloodline of Aerys the Second and Rhaella Targaryen will have the line that has, more specifically, Azor Ahai. Well, those two are brother and sister. And if you go directly back, you get to Aegon IV, who is Bloodraven's dad. That's still part of the bloodline. That is still Aegon the Conqueror's bloodline. So technically, Bloodraven is still born of Aerys II and Rhaella's bloodline.
Well,
it doesn't necessarily have to be afterwards, does it? That the bloodline,
no,
born from their bloodline, because their bloodline is exactly the same. They're brother and sister.
My God, my head is like spinning at the minute. My head is totally spinning.
This is the great thing. Now, he does. I don't necessarily know enough about the Raven because his family are Targaryen, but also he's a Blackwood, and a Blackwood is an ancient house that is still around now as well in the Game of Thrones universe. They were basically there before the first sort of men. They're like the OGs of Westeros, the continent.
Yeah, Starks can't fuck with them.
Exactly, that sort of thing. They're not a major player house anymore or anything like that, but they're still a very ancient house, which is where certain parts of the prophecy could link into what's actually happened. Obviously, this is more than likely not wrong, but that's a potential theory that I really like because it makes so much sense and you can link things back so easily. And he's a character that, again, I wanted to talk about on the podcast because it's just someone that if you just watch the shows, you've got no real idea about.
You've got no context, really. He's just a guy in a tree surrounded by little children who look like they've, gone to a really, really decent costume shop.
Exactly.
But yeah, you don't really get a lot of context with them. It's such a fucking shame because he's something special.
But it's not quite expanded on.
Why Bran?
But do you want to know something else? This is the thing. I think that because of Bran's abilities, with how strong of a walk he is,
because
Bran's class as a green sea and needed to have his gifts awakened, and that's why Bran becomes more robotic. Because he becomes really robotic. I am now the three-eyed raven. Yeah, I hated that. But now after reading up a bit more, I kind of get it a little bit more.
It would have been nice if it was a progressional thing as opposed to just.
I think this is where the show started going, not necessarily downhill, but stopped explaining things as much, to be honest. Yeah. Because he was a strong candidate anyway. Obviously, he's related to Jon Snow, so he has a personal connection. But this is also a thing for me potentially. Do you know with the new Snow show? Do you know when everyone was kind of sat there going, why on earth did Bran send Jon off to the wall again?
Because he's not convinced it's over.
Well, exactly. Did Bran see something that we don't know about and sent Jon Snow back again without?
I don't believe for a second that Jon was sent to the wall because of his pure love for it. I really don't.
No, obviously, yes, he has a good relationship with the Free People, but no.
But that's what he. But that's the need that, and that was proven that that's what was needed in order to build numbers. I do believe that he doesn't believe this is over. The Night King is one person that was created from magic that surely they've done it before. That's not their first attempt.
Exactly, and I think this is again something for it because we don't know the full capability. Well, we know the capabilities obviously because Bran's been able to influence the past. Anyway, Bloodraven being a much more talented Greenseer, 100% could have, 100%, not even by accident. He definitely could have, and Bran might be spotting to get those abilities, but that might be the reason why Bran makes certain decisions with things thereafter and why he just sits there waiting. Because this is what I didn't like about part of it is that Bran just sits there waiting. He knows what's going to happen. He knows what's going to happen already. He just sits there waiting, but he walks, and I don't know where. It's not explained where he goes.
No, he's already in transition. Like he's already in that in that mindset while he's walking up to him. It's such a goddamn shame because there was two things when George R.R. Martin handed this show over to them absolute bellends was that they knew who Jon's mother was, and that the ending, regardless of how it was done, regardless of where it went up to, what happened in the middle, the ending had to be that Bran. It was always Bran.
Yeah.
Bran was the one who would sit on the Iron Throne.
Yeah.
That was the plan from the start. Now, the goddamn shame of it all is that for a whole entire season, we didn't get a Bran arc.
Yes.
And in that time, they could have heavily expanded on his training, on an explanation, on giving us a backstory of the three-eyed raven to why.
Even spent
Bran?
an episode of when he got to the battle of when it went just before the Battle of Winterfell. I think it could have used a potential good hour.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been an extra episode, which would have explained so much more.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just
I think
give
the things
people that
will,
explanation.
Yeah, I think the things potentially will be with the new Snow Show. I'm still sure it's coming out.
There's so many rumors until I saw a poster for House of the Dragon, I didn't even think that was going to happen.
Yeah,
Oh,
let me just have a
me.
quick look. I'm pretty sure because in December 2022, there's updates about the show as well, because I'm pretty sure they've started filming for it or they've started doing certain things. We won't see it for ages anyway.
Oh yeah.
I've got so many things about that, but we can pick up on that another time. But I just wanted to, as a last kind of like little point, because I've been rattling on for a long time about stuff that people probably need a little bit of a break for those listening.
It's a lot to take in, and you know, it's so interesting. Like Sam gave us like some cliff notes of what he wanted to go through, and I was like, and more, like what?
Right, this one goes back to the sort of theories and the things that I like about the theories, and that with Maester Aemon being Bloodraven's great nephew,
mm-hmm.
I am a great believer that Maester Aemon was needed for Jon Snow. I think that he lived to an older age than what he should have, because Bloodraven kept him alive.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because he died at the right moment.
He died at the exact right moment. He revealed himself as a target, and this is where we go back to whether or not Maester Aemon actually knew, because there are theories that he knew who the three-eyed raven was. He knew it was Brendan Rivers, and they were kind of half and half in tandem with certain things.
Mm-hmm.
If he did reveal that Jon Snow was a Targaryen, it makes perfect sense. Both ways make perfect sense anyway, because it could have just been, Jon Snow special, go ahead and do whatever with it. Because with Maester Aemon saying that I'm actually a Targaryen, Jon Snow goes from being a boy to, I've got a duty, because Maester Aemon was very much, I didn't take the throne because I'm a Maester. I have a duty already.
Yeah.
I didn't want the throne. I didn't need the throne. There was other people for the throne. I had a duty as Maester. I still have a duty as Maester, even though I'm blind, I'm 100 years old.
I will still do this job, yeah.
And that's how Jon Snow kind of gets the whole point of, because Jorah Mormont was was not necessarily a perfect teacher for Jon Snow, because Jorah Mormont was very harsh in some ways. He was a perfect warrior.
Look what he did to his son.
Yeah, he's a perfect warrior coach, for instance, to give that sort of sense of duty. But Maester Aemon was the very much one that drilled it home that duty, forget your emotions. The emotions come into it at a different point. And that's why I think that he was kept alive. Yeah. Because when Jon Snow no longer needed him, he died. He died.
He died at the right moment.
With Sam Tarly as well, because Sam Tarly didn't need any more training either. Sam was very integral to Jon Snow's story arc that a lot of people don't realise.
No, they don't.
Jorah's story arc.
Yep.
It all ties in together.
It all ties in. Now, it's so great that I think what Maester Aemon taught him was because up until that point, you've got to remember, he lived with Ned Stark, the most honor-bound person that ever walked the face of Westeros. Honor-bound to the point where it got him killed. Like, that's how honor-bound he was. And Jon had that so instilled in him. And I think Maester Aemon kind of just took him to another side. Like, honor's part of it, but it's not all of it.
It's not the be all end all. Exactly.
No, you need to be clever, and I love the fact that he revealed himself to Jon. I do think that was a game plan. I don't believe that was by accident. No. Because why mention that story if it didn't need to mean something?
Exactly, and I think that's what it was. And again, that's why I don't know if I read this theory randomly and I've just forgotten the sort of where I saw the theory, or if it's just something I put together in my head. Don't know, don't care, because I like it.
Don't care, I love it. I absolutely love it. And
because Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I was going to say, obviously, with Aemon being a Targaryen anyway, and being Bloodraven's great nephew, and knowing the importance of how good a person Maester Aemon is.
Yeah.
Again, it didn't matter if Maester Aemon was going blind, he was poorly, whatever it was. Bloodraven needed him because it was for duty. It was what needed to be done. That's what a lot of things in Game of Thrones point to is we don't care about anything else. It's what needs to be done.
Yeah. That is absolutely true. And what I was going to say was, I remember a time when I first heard the R plus L equals J theory, and that was my like holy shit moment. And the fact that I'm still, how many years later, still getting those holy shit moments from this show.
It was so when that was announced, that was so good. But you know what's also another good thing as well? Is that it's Bloodraven that obviously shows Bran, because this is the thing. How would Bloodraven know where to look and know what to look at in the past? Because he was the one that directed Bran there and took Bran there.
Yeah.
It wasn't Bran, because as far as everybody else was concerned, it was more than likely just the case that Jon Snow was just a bastard of Ned. That's how it was, because of how well the secret was kept. Because there was only one writing from one random person to say that they annulled the wedding between Rhaegar Targaryen and Elia Martell, which allowed Rhaegar to then marry Lyanna.
No, he's just pulling all
married
these
in
strings.
Secret. They were married in secret, though. Nobody knew about it. How did Brendan Rivers?
Yeah. But didn't they have a proper Targaryen traditional wedding, just like what we see with Daemon and Rhaenyra in House of the Dragon?
To a degree, there was no witnesses from that flashback that you saw. There was obviously a person there officiating. More than likely, they were probably killed, because it was obviously as soon as that happened, all basically Rhaegar obviously disappeared off, and I don't really think even Sir Arthur Dayne and the other guy, I can't remember his name. I'm pretty sure he's a Hightower.
I think he's a Hightower. It's just came into my head there.
Yeah, both Gerald Hightower, I think his name is.
It's not a bad thing, but yeah.
I think it's Gerald Hightower and Sir Arthur Dayne when they're at the Tower of whatever it was called. Joy. I think it was called the Tower of Joy.
It was the Tower of Joy, but there was no joy going on in that tower.
But I don't even think that they truly, truly knew what was going on.
I don't think he would have told them.
Rhaegar, was actually in love with Lyanna. They had a baby, but what's happened to the baby, nobody knows, because Arthur Dayne's dead now. So is Gerald Hightower.
Yeah.
So nobody realistically knew. So this is again going back to what influences of Bloodraven, because he literally knew about it already, but how would he have possibly known? Because during this time that this was happening, he was already the Three-Eyed Raven.
That's true.
He was he could have walked and seen certain things. You just don't know, but he knew already, because he had to take Bran there.
Yeah. He had to have known to take him there. Absolutely.
Whether the Bloodraven knew that the White Walkers were getting probably too close to him being connected to the Weird Tree, so that's why he needed Bran, because I can't leave now, but you still can.
Yeah.
Let me train you up. This is the knowledge that I have. This is the important stuff.
This is what you need to know.
To hone his ability. Exactly. Train him to hone his abilities. But as far as the main proper thing was Jon Snow, and Jon Snow's real lineage.
Bloody hell.
But then again, obviously, the show kind of half ruined it, because Jon Snow's real lineage doesn't really mean anything until potentially, do you know when they vote for the new kings now at the end of Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
Once Jon Snow's kind of dealt with potentially the threat in the north, it could be the case of, we're voting for Jon because, hang on a minute, because I don't think everybody knows, because it's still kept a secret, I think. I can't remember if everybody knows. I still think it's still a secret that
nobody knew. No, it wasn't. It wasn't revealed, because otherwise, when they were and to just remind us, Edmund Tully putting his stake in, I couldn't stop laughing. Could not stop laughing when he was like, "I'll do it."
Great character.
Jump on. Honestly, probably one of the strongest in there. He managed to survive the Red Wedding. He managed to survive all them battles, and still Edmund Tully is standing strong at the end. Like, come on.
It's ridiculous, and it's funny. But I think potentially it could be the...
Potentially, I think Tyrion would have said there and then, it's Jon Snow.
Well, it's not. It's. I'm pretty sure it's Aegon Targaryen.
I think he
Aegon
would have done it,
VI.
and I think it would have been quite clever on his part because it would have really rattled Grey Worm.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't. He went down. Again, we'll talk about this another time because I think it's probably time we stop rabbiting on because we've been at this for a while. I don't know, how long have we been going for now?
I don't know now.
It's been an hour.
But I said to you, if we're getting into it, then we're getting into it. And I think when people are going to look at the title of this episode, they're going to think we're talking about Daenerys and that side of things. But I think this is so special because there's so much more
100%.
So much more of the Targaryens to go into. I did bring 2 books if you ever are interested in reference points for the Targaryens.
I interrupted you, I think, when you were going.
Oh no, it was just came to my mind when I was looking at it. I have Fire and Blood, which is, it's so clever. I think I mentioned on last week how it is George R.R. Martin.
Yes,
but it's taken from the notes of another maester and compiled the Targaryen bloodline. I haven't even scratched the surface on this yet. Haven't even started. But this one was released at Christmas, and it's Rise of the Dragon. They brought out one a few years ago called A Song of the World of Ice and Fire. And it was all about the First Men and the Andals and the Starks and everything to do with that. This is obviously about the Targaryen dynasty, and it actually says volume 1. So I can imagine, but the artwork in it is absolutely astounding.
Oh, picture book! I'll definitely be buying that then.
Yeah,
I'm terrible with words. Pictures, I love that.
It's pictures. It's a lot of artwork, but there is stories to it. That is not a pleasant picture to look at. There is stories to accompany it, but it is an absolutely beautiful book and great reference point if you are interested in the Targaryens.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, from what I've mentioned and stuff like that, go do your own reading things. You can simply type in Brynden Rivers into Google, and you can go so.
Mate, I'm going to do that straight after this. Straight after this, I'm going to be on a deep dive.
If someone doesn't agree with it, I mean, again, like I said at the very start, all lines. I mean, it is. I don't show wise. It's never confirmed. Book wise, again, I don't know because I've not read the books. As far as my
we've made that very clear, and I won't be making too much of a point in the future that we are not book readers. So
yeah, of course, yeah. But as far as reading up on the internet, this is basically where all signs lead to Brynden Rivers being the Blood Raven, and it all does make sense because of his magical abilities. And like I said, the sort of theories that have come off of that, a couple of those theories are my theories, but also these are theories that are taken from other people. I would credit them, but I don't know where I got them from.
Nah, we'll find out.
There's bits and bobs on YouTube from a lot of different people. Yeah. Anyway, and a lot of things are taken as well from, like a Wiki Ice of Fire and other different.
Wiki Ice of Fire actually is a good. I always the Wikipedia for Star Wars is a minefield, but this one was very straight, and I love the introduction of the Targaryens. That's why I decided to read it for. But that was such a good first strong episode. I enjoyed that.
I think we've done really. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good starting point as well because it's got connections to the entirety of the world of Game of Thrones anyway, from basically start to finish. Absolutely. The Targaryens have been there, done that.
Yes, they most certainly have. So, how are we going to pick next week's episode from the wheel?
I'm spinning right now. So, next week's episode is going to be top 5 favourite episodes.
Oh, we are heading into
an interesting one.
We are heading into top 5. Now, are we just going to go Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones, yeah, sorry. I keep spinning this bloody wheel. Sorry. I don't know what's going on. If you can hear that, I kept on trying to click off of it. Just spin it again.
So, top 5 Game of Thrones episodes.
Yeah, I think we'll do. I don't know, because there's 10 episodes, isn't there, in House of the Dragon?
Yeah.
I think if you really want to include one, I don't think it really matters.
Okay. I doubt that I will.
Because there's more. Okay. I think as far as favourite go, regardless, I think that with me anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's very much a case of even my favorite House of the Dragon episode doesn't cut the cloth for 5 best Game of Thrones episodes. And I can guarantee you right now that one of my pretty much in my top 5 is going to be. I'll warn people for next time. It's going to get controversial.
Oh,
it's going to get controversial.
oh,
I can guarantee that right now because.
Oh.
And one of my I'm not going to be fair. I'm not going to say much more, but it's going to get controversial because some of my favorite episodes are actually in the area of Game of Thrones.
Okay, so next week, top 5 episodes. Interesting. So this is next.
I think we just about what we mean, kind of on that. I think we're not just going to name the episode and go away and watch it. I think we should give a brief.
No. I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah, brief synopsis on what we loved about the episode in itself. I think
I'm going to get emotional. I'm going to get absolutely raging.
Well, I am going to.
Yeah, be prepared. When it comes to top 5s, if you are a regular to the normal podcast, when we do a top 5, it can spill over because there's so much that you want to cover, and then obviously the other person's going to have their thoughts on it. So yeah, top 5's always going to be a bit lengthy, but if you are in it, you are in it. So
very, very much so.
This is an exclusive content for Patreon. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, you will get this episode first. If not, you will be seeing us in a few weeks' time on YouTube. You can come and join us on our community page on Facebook and connect to your other fellow like-minded nerds. Our main show is still on a Sunday live at 7:30 on YouTube. This week's episode is Jump the Shark Moments.
Oh,
so that was going to be an interesting one. You can also follow us on our social media pages on Instagram and TikTok and watch us play video games on Twitch.
Yes, and for people that are watching, if they find us by different means and stuff like that, the main channel this is associated with is Nerdy Up North.
Yes.
Type it into Facebook, Nerdy Up North Community. It's right there. You don't have to be a Northerner to join. You don't even have to be English.
That is very true. We have a lot of Americans in there.
Yeah, so... I mean, I think it was sub 1,000 when I joined. I think it was only like 500-600 people when I first joined, and I don't remember how I found you.
I think I'm either number 2 or number 3. Can't remember.
Oh, an OG.
Can't remember. OG, yeah. I was there right at the beginning, right, because this isn't how it was meant to go. Is not how we planned it. Is not how it went. It's just blew up. But yes, you can. Honestly, the conversations that happened on the Facebook community page is absolutely phenomenal. And once this is on YouTube, if you've got anything that you want to let us know, or even in the comments on Patreon, we have comments on Patreon too.
Yeah, comments on Patreon.
Let us know what you think.
We'll both be looking at the comments anyway and interacting where we can, realistically. Yeah.
Well, thanks for a great episode, and I can't wait for top 5s.
Yeah, and I'm excited for that one as well.
Yes. So
even
thanks
more
research. Yeah, homework. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Stay nerdy. Bye.
Thank you very much. See you later, guys.
Bye.